It's another Manly Monday, and wow, I did the what is it? The millennial pause on that. I hit record. It's like, is it working? Because last week I did a video and actually hadn't hit record, and I talked for 12 minutes and didn't notice it. You may notice I'm a little mad science-y. It's either mad science-y or beachy here. Mad science. Over the weekend, we did another, it's not therapy workshop. We did it on healthy conflict. It was great. We did a slightly smaller, it was in a slightly different format because it was a smaller group, and I think it worked really, really well. And this sort of inspired what I'm talking about today. Because one of the things we talked about was unresolved trauma and how it leads to unhealthy conflicts. So I'm going to pick up on that. Um, but pivot it obviously towards men. And I mean, the bulk of the people who our clients attend workshops, everything like that, are men. So this is a good ecosystem. If you want to support this ecosystem, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. Okay, so anger and healing. That's what come on, camera. That's what I want to talk about today, because one of the things with men specifically is it's a combination of social expectation leading to the framing of behavior. People judge things differently in men and women and then gender nonconforming individuals. And in this case, I lump myself into that gender nonconforming individuals because, a lot of the time people think I'm angry and I'm not. I'm just excited about something and sharing. And we talked about that, the sharing in the workshop was awesome. But for a lot of men, not all, I mean, anger is a stage of grief for everyone. But, women will do the venting. Venting in women's circles and women's spaces is seen as an acceptable activity. When men vent, it's labeled as scary. I see the issue there. It's confusing. And a really toxic message that left-wing thought has directed at men is the duality of treat everyone equally, equality is good, equality is the goal, and then shut up, sit down, and don't speak, man, straight cisgender man. That creates a result of, okay, if I'm supposed to sit down and shut up and not speak, and I'm supposed to treat people equally, then other people, shouldn't they be sitting down and shutting? How? Feedback loop, bad code crash, right? Bad command or file name. Yes, I learned computers on DOS. And this keeps getting into a loop of blame and repression that is not healthy. And it's the repression, the bottled up, the fear to speak, the packed down. It's become such a defining characteristic of Gen Z that they made the Flash with an anxiety condition and socially awkward. They made the Flash a anxiety-ridden, socially awkward, over-talking virgin. He's supposed to be the cool with the young kids character in the Snyderverse. I found that very interesting. So everybody's suppressed. Everybody's afraid to express. Everyone's afraid to be authentic. And when you start processing that, you have to grieve. And that is a have to. It's not you should. In order to process, you have to grieve the bad stuff. And we know the stages of grief, and one of them is anger. But the minute men and women get shut down in different ways with anger, but one of the ways a lot of men are shut down is it's scary, it's abusive, all this stuff. And everybody gets angry. And yes, there are ways of handling anger that are better than others. Anger is not an excuse for abuse. And, but when you're first learning, when you've had all these repressed things, when you have an underdeveloped emotional vocabulary because you're depressed, when you don't know how to identify and name your feelings, there are going to be explosion moments. There are. It's, in an ideal world, people learn these things between the ages of like 12 and 17, 12 and 18. But because everything is so regimented in anything to do with youth now, there's so many rules, there's so many zero tolerance things that no one's allowed to fight it out when they're younger. And when I'm in rooms with a bunch of Gen Zers, like, especially people who are either in university or just getting out of it, you can feel the crackle. You can feel the vibration and it's my anxiety. Well, anxiety, like depression, is an umbrella term. It's this big catch-all statement. And these are people who have been to a lot of therapy who don't have their arms around the issue. Because anxiety is in big part a processing issue. It's overload. It's not knowing where you fit in the world, not knowing things are going to be okay, feeling bad about feeling bad. And it's a cycle of you get so anxious that your endocrine system gets worn out and then you get depressed. And just when you start feeling not depressed, you get anxious again. And it's just this loop because, you might be not depressed, but you're not happy either. You're just cranked. And the only way through that is to start feeling, sorting, and processing your feelings. And you have to practice how to effectively, how to basically unpack things without making a giant mess, without it being, God, this is an old reference, but the old trick cans of peanut brittle where you open it up and like the slinky snakes come out of it. That was the shit in the 80s. I guess the alternative now is just like a jib splatter in a video game. Like, you don't want that. You want it to be able to sort of, you want it to be a blood draw, organized, not messy, instead of, explosion. And you don't get it right the first time. You have to work on it. And when those emotions finally do start getting felt, they feel huge. And I know my experiences, with depression as an adolescent, and then, the underpinnings of the PTS were probably already there. And in fact, they were. But, when I was a teenager, I was angry about a lot of things. I felt like I didn't fit anywhere. I was constantly criticized for not being normal. I was, we found our little group of freaky goth art kids. And it was great. That's how I discovered Pearl Jam. A guy gave me a mixtape. His name was Spencer. A guy named Spencer gave me a mixtape of Pearl Jam's 10, which would be pirating now. But, he introduced me to one of my favorite albums of all time. I love that album. Uh, and we had grunge, we had alt rock, we had, pick your pick your flavor of cathartic negative emotional experience. The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, Depeche Mode's Black Celebration album. We didn't necessarily talk maturely, but we had those structures. And now everything is Spotify songs. So they just start and they have to be done in a certain amount of time. And, the TikTok, it has to get right into it. You can't build, that great guitar riff on Black, the dun, 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 that you're settling in. You can't do that in music anymore because you have to get the hook in like 9 seconds or somebody's going to skip the song. That's why all Beyonce songs just start. It's beat, 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 beat. All the single ladies. Like, there's a reason Beyonce songs just crazy enough. Boom. Just starts with the hook. Blam. It's like running into a wall. And there's a reason. It's for the format. But there's no flow when that happens. It's all just go. And they're great songs. They're catchy. But it doesn't have the induction and then the coming out of it that those old albums had. I mean, even the hip hop at the time, there were like skits in between tracks on the album and these long intros because they were designed to, be mixing media to contextualize what the song was. Because when you listen to, especially a lot of, what was called at the time gangsta rap, like the demarcations between gangsta and hip hop, gangsta rap and conscious hip hop. I don't know where you put a group like NWA or Public Enemy. Like everybody's like, oh no, NWA is straight up gangsta. But there was social consciousness messaging in those songs. It just wasn't the ones that people like Tipper Gore could hear. And anger was a big part of it. But we knew that it wasn't, the audience it was for was, okay, we knew that this wasn't something people were saying you should do. These are people struggling with what they did do. And one of the best modern practitioners of that old, I don't know if you'd call what he does now grime, but Mad Child, he's a rapper who was Canadian guy, formerly in a group called Swollen Members. I think they still do stuff together, but he does great rap in that tradition. Like he goes dark and he uses a lot of metaphors and things like that, but he's talking about his feelings. Sounds real angry, but he's talking about his feelings. Orelsan is a French artist. God, I said that Japanese. Why is not French? San. But he's a great French language artist who does the same thing and is frequently misunderstood. But for people who process that way, the anger is part of the pain. It's saying, ow. And everybody has to be able to feel all their feelings. And, what happened to hip hop and video games and Dungeons and Dragons, it's all the same mistake. It's all the same demands with society, bottling it all up. And, we had the moral panic of D&D, but they couldn't do very much. Distribution was more decentralized. It's not like the internet where, the social media company can just hit a button and you're blocked. Now, I mean, even with video games back then, when the hearings with Mortal Kombat and Doom and you know, the First Amendment challenge and all that stuff. And I was freaky for a while. But even if a store wouldn't sell it, you could like sneak the copy to somebody. Everything's so digital now that the ability to limit personal exploration through media is real. It's everybody's more tamped down than ever. And when you get any, bullying or violence or abuse, that's just making the contents even more under pressure, right? And so we have it. And I mean, I work with a lot of people who were bullied, and I hate that term. I call it social abuse, because in a lot of cases, it wasn't regular beatings. It was just enough violence to make good on the threat. It was the the apprehension, the tension, the being afraid, the being ostracized, the being shoved in a corner, shoved down, held back, that stays with people. And of course, there's just enough incidences of pain to make the point stick. And I know from experience that healing from that requires getting that anger out. And, for some people, writing letters, just writing it out is enough. But some people, it's like, well, what's the point? I'm not going to send it. And if it feels pointless, it's not going to work. But people try to talk about it and they're minimized. Oh, people had it worse. There's an exchange on Twitter, and I admit I pounded the shit out of the guy, proverbially, metaphorically, where I said something about, a lot of men are walking around bullied, recovering from bullying. I don't believe this, protect women and girls messaging. It ain't my thing, because I think everyone deserves to feel safe in society. And dudes jumped on me for that. I almost dropped an MF again. People found that very amusing when I dropped a mother last week. I try not to say that. I just find it coarse. There's a place for it, mostly when I'm playing games on Twitch. But, I was like, no, women and girls have it. It's more important. And I'm like, guys are watching this because other guys agreed, and thank you for saying that. And I was like, no, it's more important because even the worst thing a guy suffers, he's privileged. And I'm like, first of all, buddy, you're, protect women and girls, so shut up, bitch. Self-awareness, dump stat. But also, I felt protective. I felt defensive of the guys who obviously went through something really, really lousy and were sharing. And it pissed me off that these guys were stomping all over them. So I said, 1 in 20 boys is not just abused, sexually harassed or abused. 1 in 20 boys, 5%. That's a lot. And that's just, what we consider really bad abuse. I don't, a friend's kid is getting, I know two people whose kids are getting really badly bullied in school. And the school's not doing anything. Because the school boards are rewarded for inaction. Because if you take action, these kids are bullies, which means their parents are probably bullies, which means they're the ones that are most likely to sue the school. And if there are any identity points they can leverage to say the school is discriminating, they'll do it because they're bullies, And I think people should be able to speak up. I think people should speak up about, if they think they're being done dirty, say so. We all got to talk. Healthy conflict. And but that's not what this is. That is them using systemic power to violate another person's boundaries. And that's wrong. Um, and guys are walking around with this stuff as adults. And, we'll be talking and they'll start talking and you'll see they're getting angry. And I know they're not angry at me, but they're getting very passionate about it. And like to the point that they're shaking sometimes. But I'm like, this is good. This is good. Yep. Keep going. And then they'll apologize. I'm like, for what? Because they got upset. It's like, so you had every right to be upset. That's a shitty thing. I took it out on you. No, you didn't. I was just here. I was walking with you. I wasn't in your way. But obviously, they've had negative experiences when they tried to talk about that stuff in the past. I've noticed another thing. It's kind of cute, but at the same time, I'm like, that when someone, in the workshop, a guy asked a really great question, and we tried a new format where instead of breaking it into smaller sessions, because it was a small enough group that we could all just concentrate, stay in one place. So each of the bubbleheads gave their piece, and so we spent about 20 minutes focusing on this one guy's question. And we did the whole, my method of conflict is called, my healthy conflict method is called suck. Embrace the suck. Set goals, understand fully, communicate effectively, kindness, suck. I think it's funny. But we went through the 4 steps, and at the end he says, thank you, that was really helpful. I was worried I was, talking too much, stealing too much time. And I was like, no, it was great. That was an opportunity for us. But that was like, and a lot of other people in the panel agreed that they feel like that the permission to take up space, permission to make noise, permission to take time is not there. And I've heard this from other people, and it's just like, we are human, we exist. And I get angry on these guys' behalf because they're cool people and they have insightful things to say. And that's a legitimate feeling. They've been taught to feel that way. And I'm just like, I got to do something about this. And, a lot of the things I do is I get pissed off enough that I want to start breaking heads. And I know I can't literally break heads, so I have to break the system. And allowing people to feel anger in a productive way that actually heals, because it's getting to the core of the reason for their anger so they can actually heal instead of just fighting about secret invasion. That's essential. It's a part of the process. It's not a nice to have. It's not something, okay, if there's time. No, it's essential to healing. Because if you're not getting mad at the thing that hurt you, it's coming out in other places. One of the things I dealt with at the workshop was that science shows that people who have lower emotional vocabularies and therefore don't feel and process their feelings actually have higher physiological responses. So greater blood pressure spike, greater cortisol spike than people who are aware of their feelings. So they're going to get you one way or the other. And one of my favorite things is when a shy person starts talking or an avoidant person starts talking and then they can't stop. And I watch their whole body language change. And I described it on the panel as the introvert, I'm outside. I'm around people. There's a lot of people. I need to say words. I'm saying words. I can't stop saying words. Why can't I stop saying words? Oh my God, please stop saying words. I am still saying words, Doug the dog. But they feel comfortable enough to talk. And I care more about that than the over talking. It's like, yeah, we'll go long, no problem. Info dump. neurodivergent love language, sharing. And that feeling of being seen is uncomfortable because it's like, oh my God, people notice me. Oh my God. But it's good. It's deserved. They're worth it. And it's such a small thing that it is notable to me that so few people have it in their lives. It's like, why? How? What is this? What is this? Why? This is such a simple thing. This is such a human thing. Why are people lacking it? Because we don't allow anger in too many places anymore. And I mean, I chewed up my insides because my biological father had, well, he had a lot of issues, but an anger management issue was one of them. And so I was always afraid of getting angry because I didn't want to be like him. You know, goal number one of Leanna's life, don't be my dad. Because he hurt people with his anger. He was abusive. And, you know, not only did he hurt other people, our financial lives, like our well-being was unstable because he couldn't hold a job, because he blew up. He was inappropriate. He never learned his entire life. He never learned healthy anger because, you know, I don't think he believed it existed. I think he believed that anger was an escape from the bad feelings. So when he got angry and it burned like a wildfire, and all of a sudden everyone stopped and tried to placate him because he was scary, and, you know, it was a false sense of control. And so it wasn't a targeted, you know, blowtorch to weld a break. It was a forest fire that just scorched everything. And I think underlying it was fear and anxiety and an inability to be vulnerable. But because anger is that guard, anger is, remember I talked about Garm, the giant dog that, or wolf, that surrounds hell in Norse myth. That's what anger is for a lot of people. And so you have to get past the guard dog to get to those more vulnerable emotions that are us. If we don't, that's our emotional needs. That's validating as humans. If we don't get to those, we're depressed, we're anxious, we feel cut off, we dissociate, we're not centered. And the anger has to be bypassed or bargained with. And you really can't bypass it. Bypass is wrong. I am like, I'm angry. I'm angry. And I will, it's the stupidest thing, but it works. I'll be like, I'm angry. I just say I'm angry over and over and over again. It's an emotive acting technique that I've repurposed. Because what it's a process where you speak the emotions of the scene, not the language to connect to it. You do it sometimes with stuff like Shakespeare because it's so precise, and sometimes you get lost in language, so you're not acting. So you'll do a blocking exercise where, like, at the end of Romeo and Juliet, like, oh no, the lover I was supposed to meet so we were run away together is dead. Oh, you know, like, you do that in dance too to make sure you get the performance. Just saw Romeo and Juliet at the ballet, a friend of mine. But with emotions, it's like, when I'm angry, because I got that fight response, inner Kratos, it's like, I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. And so every time the thought, the urge to punch, It feels like punching up at the time. It's not. But every time a thought forms, it's like, I'm angry. And another thought forms, I'm going to get them. I'm angry. I'm going to show them all I'm angry. And it will eventually get to a manageable level. And so I don't turn into a supervillain written poorly by Joss Whedon, with no concept of character voice. Ben Croshaw said that initially in public. That did not come from me. Great insight by Yahtzee. But that's what I do when I'm feeling angry. I allow myself to feel it, but I have that exercise so it stays contained. It's a controlled burn, and so I don't break shit. Try it. You can say it internally, or, sometimes I text myself, open up a document, just write it. If you can't say it, just something, all those plans are actually just feeling that anger. So distilling it to, I am angry. I am angry. The other thing there's an Ernie and Bert skit in Sesame Street where they're about to go to bed and Ernie wants a glass of water. And it's Ernie being passive aggressive. So instead of saying, Bert, can you get me a glass of water? It's, so thirsty. So thirsty, Bert. I am so thirsty. And Bert's just getting, and that's passive aggressive. Don't do that. But the emoting, the technique works if it's just you. Because, why is Ernie doing that? Because he doesn't want to get up and go get a drink. He wants somebody to do it for him. He's not acting. That's what you're doing. It's any bad emotion that you have trouble feeling. But this is focused on anger. Try it. It makes it more manageable. And if you don't find that quite works, but if you want to adapt it to something that does for you, by all means, this is just a starting point. I'm just saying what works for me. Individual mileage may vary. There's no one size fits all. So help support this channel. Help this work. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK, where my next major project is getting the men's group up and running. So look for that. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Jeez. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching. Manly Mondays.